The life drained from Grace Obi's arm drop by drop, flowing through the thin tube into the blood collection bag. It was her second donation this month, a dangerous frequency that the clinic staff had begun to notice, but couldn't stop because they needed the blood, and she needed the money. Grace bit her lip to keep from crying out, not from the physical pain of the needle, but from the deeper ache that had become her constant companion. The pain of watching her only son struggle through university while she could barely keep food on their table. "Mama, please," the young nurse whispered, her face creased with worry. "Your body needs time to heal. The blood bank rules say..." "Rules!" Grace cut her off, her voice low but firm. "What rules feed my son? What rules pay his school fees?" She turned her face to the window, where the morning light cast long shadows across the clinic floor. Outside, other mothers walked with their children, laughing, living normal lives that didn't require selling parts of themselves to survive. The nurse sighed and prepared the needle. "At least eat something sweet afterward. I'll bring you tea and biscuits." Grace nodded but didn't speak. The sharp prick of the needle entering her vein was nothing compared to the pain in her heart, the fear that even this sacrifice might not be enough. As her blood flowed through the tube into the collection bag, turning it crimson, she closed her eyes and pictured her son James in his university classroom in Lagos. Tall, handsome, his face bent over books that would change his future, their future. God, she prayed silently, let it all be worth it. When the procedure finished, Grace sat up slowly, fighting the wave of dizziness that washed over her. The nurse brought her tea with extra sugar and 2 biscuits from her own lunch. Grace sipped the tea gratefully, her hands trembling slightly. "The money," she said, her voice barely audible. The clerk counted out 5,000 naira and placed it in her palm. Grace curled her fingers around the bills, still warm from the counting machine, and tucked them carefully into her wrapper's hidden pocket, next to the 3,000 she had earned selling yams at the market yesterday. 8,000 naira. Almost enough for James's textbooks this semester. Outside the clinic, the sun beat down mercilessly. Grace pulled her faded head tie lower to shield her eyes and began the 3-kilometer walk home. Her small farm lay on the outskirts of the village, where land was cheaper but the soil poorer. Still, she had coaxed yams and cassava from that reluctant earth for 15 years, ever since her husband died, leaving her alone with their 5-year-old son. Her phone rang, the cheap Nokia she kept charged with precious tokens at the village shop. Her heart skipped when she saw it was James. "Mama?" His voice sounded distant, the connection crackled. "My son, I was just thinking of you." She smiled despite her exhaustion, leaning against a roadside tree for support. "I need more money, Mama. The professor says I must buy this extra book for the exams." Grace closed her eyes, swallowing hard. "How much, my son?" 12,000 naira, 4,000 more than she had. Her mind raced through possibilities. What else could she sell? The small radio? The second cooking pot? Or should she ask for an advance from Chief Adamu, though his eyes always lingered too long when she approached him for loans? "Mama? Are you there?" "Yes, James. I will send it tomorrow." "Thank you, Mama. You know this education is my only way out. Our way out." Grace straightened her back despite no one being there to see it. "I know, my son. And when you finish and become successful..." "I will take care of you," James finished, his voice warming. "You will live in a big house in the city. You will never work again. I will make sure you will never suffer again." "I promise, Mama." After they hung up, Grace stood motionless, the phone clutched to her chest. His promises were the ladder she climbed each day, rising above the poverty, the tired body, the judgmental whispers of villagers who thought she spoiled her son while neglecting herself. "A mother does what she must," she whispered to the indifferent sky. That evening, after selling her radio to a neighbor for the remaining 4,000 naira, Grace sat alone on her small veranda, eating a simple meal of boiled cassava. The night creatures sang their chorus as darkness settled over the village. She thought of James in his university dormitory, perhaps studying by lamplight, unaware that his mother had given not just sweat and tears for his education, but her very blood. It doesn't matter, she told herself. When he succeeds, all this will be forgotten. As seasons turned, Grace marked the passing time with rituals of hope. Graduation day, she wore her best wrapper and head tie to the village square, borrowing old Musa's radio to listen for any mention of university ceremonies in Lagos. Each Christmas, she cleaned her small house thoroughly, arranging and rearranging the few decorations she owned, telling neighbors that James might visit. Each birthday, she prepared his favorite soup, letting the familiar aroma fill her empty home as she whispered prayers of protection. The first year passed with frequent calls and promises. The second year brought fewer calls, but still, James sent money. The third year, his excuses grew elaborate: work pressure, travel obligations, a new business venture. The fourth year, the phone calls dwindled to holidays only. By the fifth year, silence had become her most faithful companion. 5 years of planting and harvesting. 5 years of hope planted like yams in uncertain soil, watered with tears, yielding a crop of disappointment. On a humid morning in the 5th year since James's graduation, Grace stood at the edge of her small farm, watching rain clouds gather on the horizon. At 52, her body carried the story of her hard life: calloused hands, a back that ached in the mornings, and eyes that had seen too many disappointments. But none as painful as her son's gradual silence. James had graduated 3 years ago. He had called, excited, promising to come for her soon. "Just let me get settled, Mama. Find the right job, the right place for us." But the visits never materialized. The calls grew shorter, less frequent. Excuses replaced promises. Last Christmas, he had sent money instead of coming home. A generous amount that both pleased and wounded her. Money was not what she wanted from her only child. In the village, rumors trickled back. James had a good job in Lagos. James drove a fancy car. James had married a woman from a wealthy family. James had a son, a grandson Grace had never seen. Each rumor was a small knife in her heart. Not because he was successful, that had been her dream, but because he had built a life that apparently had no place for her in it. Today, watching the rain begin to fall on her yam mounds, Grace made a decision that had been forming slowly, painfully, over months of silence. "I will go to him," she said aloud, her voice startling a nearby bird into flight. "If my son won't come to me, then I will go to my son." That night, she laid out her best wrapper, the blue and gold one she saved for Christmas and Easter. She gathered what little money she had saved, selling extra yams at the market for weeks to afford this journey. She packed a basket with the finest yams from her harvest, a bottle of palm oil she had processed herself, and dried herbs from her garden. The flavors of home James had loved as a boy. Grace barely slept, her mind racing with hopes and fears. Would James welcome her? Would his wife accept her? Would her grandson know who she was? Morning came with a gentle rain, a blessing for her journey, the elders would say. Grace dressed carefully, wrapping her grey-streaked hair in a fresh head tie. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror that had belonged to her mother. The face that looked back was dignified, determined, despite the lines of hardship etched around her eyes and mouth. "I am still his mother," she told her reflection. The journey to Lagos was endless, 8 hours that stretched like 20. The bus rattled over potholed roads, making Grace's bones ache. Yet each kilometer brought her closer to James, to the reunion she had imagined countless times. Lagos assaulted her senses as the bus finally entered the sprawling city at dusk. Lights, noise, crowds, the smell of exhaust and food, and too many people living too close together. Grace clutched her basket of gifts and bag of clothes, feeling suddenly small and old and out of place. She took a taxi, spending more money than she would normally use for a week's food. The driver looked at her in the rearview mirror with curiosity as she gave him the address, an upscale neighborhood where people like her didn't belong. "Visiting family, Mama?" he asked. "My son," she said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "He is a successful businessman now." The taxi wound through increasingly elegant streets until it stopped before a tall apartment building with a security gate. Grace paid the fare with shaking hands and approached the uniformed guard, her heart pounding. "Good evening," she said, summoning her dignity. "I am here to see my son, James Obi." The guard looked her up and down, taking in her village clothes, her worn shoes, the basket of rural gifts, and frowned. "Your son lives here? Which apartment?" 5B, Grace said, the number memorized from the rare letters James had sent. The guard's disbelief was clear, but he picked up his phone and called. Grace stood straight, ignoring the way her back ached from the long journey. She was a mother coming to see her son. There was nothing to be ashamed of. After a brief conversation, the guard returned, his face now a careful mask. "You can go up, Mama. 5th floor." Grace crossed the manicured garden, noticing how out of place her dusty feet looked on the gleaming tile. The elevator, a rare luxury she had used perhaps twice in her life, carried her upward, and with each floor her heart beat faster. Standing before apartment 5B, basket in hand, Grace took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened, and there stood James, her son, her life's work. Taller than she remembered, dressed in clothes that cost more than she earned in months, his face frozen in an expression she had never thought to see directed at her. Horror, shame, fear. "Mama," he whispered, quickly looking behind him into the apartment. "What are you doing here? How did you find this place?" Before she could answer, a woman's voice called from inside. "James? Who is it at this hour?" James stepped into the hallway, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. "You can't be here," he hissed, his voice a stranger's. "Not now. Not like this." Grace stood motionless, the basket of gifts suddenly heavy in her arms. The yams she had nurtured, the oil she had pressed, the herbs she had dried, all suddenly silly, embarrassing offerings. "I wanted to see you," she said simply, her voice remarkably steady despite the earthquake in her chest. "I wanted to meet my grandchild." The door opened wider, and a beautiful young woman appeared in an elegant silk loungewear. She looked at Grace with undisguised distaste. "James, who is this village woman? Why is she at our door?" Grace watched her son's face, waiting for him to say the words that would define everything between them. Waiting for him to say, "This is my mother." Instead, James cleared his throat and said, "This is Mama Grace, from my home village, a family friend who helped raise me." The world tilted beneath Grace's feet. The basket nearly slipped from her grasp. Family friend? The woman who had sold her blood to educate him. The woman who had gone hungry so he could eat. The woman whose body had carried him, birthed him, nursed him. "I see," his wife said, her tone dismissive. "Well, it's late for village visitors. Perhaps she can come back another time." James wouldn't meet Grace's eyes. "Yes, that would be better. Tomorrow, perhaps." Grace found her voice, though it came from somewhere distant. "I brought gifts from home, fresh yams, palm oil, the herbs you liked in your soup." A flash of something, recognition, memory, perhaps even longing, crossed James's face. Then his expression hardened again as his wife made a small sound of disgust. "Village food. We shop at the supermarket, James. Tell her we don't need these things." "I have to go now," James said, suddenly pressing something into her hand. "Money," she realized with a fresh wave of pain. "Take a taxi back to wherever you're staying. I'll call you." Grace looked down at the crisp notes, more money than she would normally see in a month. This was what she was worth to him now. A problem to be solved with cash, a village woman to be sent away before she embarrassed him further. She let the money fall to the plush carpet between them. "I did not come for your money, James," she said, her voice breaking at last. "I came for my son, the one I carried for 9 months, the one I fed with my blood then, and have fed with my blood since." His wife's eyes widened in shock, but James only looked more desperate to end this encounter. As she turned to go, a small voice came from inside the apartment. "Daddy? Who's at the door?" A little boy, no more than 4 years old, appeared beside James's wife, Grace's grandson, her blood, her legacy. The child she had never known existed until village rumors reached her. Their eyes met, the old woman who had sacrificed everything, and the child who would never know what those sacrifices meant. Something passed between them, something James saw and feared. "Go back inside, Daniel," he said sharply. "It's just a visitor. No one important." No one important. The words cut deeper than any knife could reach. Grace turned away, her back straight despite the weight crushing her heart. She walked toward the elevator, each step taking her further from the son she had given her blood for, literally and figuratively. Behind her, she heard James's wife say, "Really, James, you need to tell these village people they can't just show up at our door. What will the neighbors think?" The elevator doors closed, hiding Grace's first tears. They fell silently, just as her blood had flowed silently into collection bags year after year, so that her son could become the man who was now ashamed to call her mother. The hotel room was small but clean, the cheapest Grace could find after wandering the unfamiliar streets of Lagos for hours, her heart as heavy as the basket of rejected gifts she still carried. She sat on the edge of the thin mattress, her body exhausted, but her mind racing through the moment that had shattered her world. Family friend. The words echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. She had given this boy life, nursed him at her breast, sold her blood to educate him, and now she was reduced to family friend. Her phone buzzed. James. She let it ring 4 times before answering. "Mama!" His voice came through, softer now, apologetic. "Where are you staying? Are you safe?" "Does it matter to you?" Grace asked, surprised by the coldness in her own voice. "Of course it matters. You're my—" He stopped himself. Even now he couldn't say it. "You're what, James? Your burden? Your shame?" Her voice broke on the last word. A long pause followed. "I need to see you. We need to talk. Please, tell me where you are." An hour later, a knock came at her door. James stood there, no longer in his fine clothes but in a simple t-shirt and jeans, as if dressing down would somehow bridge the gulf between them. His eyes couldn't meet hers. "Come in," Grace said, stepping aside. James entered the small room, looking around with barely disguised distaste at the peeling paint and worn furniture. He remained standing, too uncomfortable to sit. "Mama," he began, his voice low. "You have to understand my situation." "Explain it to me then," Grace said, folding her arms across her chest. "Explain why my son is ashamed of me." "I'm not ashamed," James protested, but his eyes betrayed him. "It's complicated. When I met Sophia, her family, they're important people. Chief Williams, her father, he has connections everywhere. They wouldn't have accepted me if they knew." "If they knew what? That your mother is a poor farmer? That I sold my blood to put you through school?" Grace's voice remained steady, though her heart was crumbling. James flinched. "I told them my parents died when I was young, that I was raised by distant relatives." Grace felt the room spin around her. Dead. He had declared her dead rather than acknowledge his humble origins. "And now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now that I am here, in the flesh, what will you tell them?" James ran his hands over his face. "Sophia is pregnant again. Her family is investing in my new business. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built." He looked at her with pleading eyes. "Can't you just be Mama Grace from the village? Just for a little while?" The request hung in the air between them like poison. He was asking her to deny their bond, to participate in her own erasure. "And what about my grandson?" Grace asked. "Will he know who I really am?" James looked away. "Daniel is only 4. He won't understand the complications." "There is nothing complicated about a grandmother's love," Grace said, her voice breaking at last. "Please, Mama," James begged, suddenly falling to his knees before her, a gesture that should have been respectful but felt hollow. "If you ever love me, do this for me, just for now. I promise, once my business is established, once I'm secure, everything will be different." Grace looked down at her son, this stranger wearing her child's face, and felt something inside her crack open, not just her heart, but her faith in everything she thought she knew. "Get up," she said tiredly. "A son should never have to beg his mother like this." James rose, hope flickering in his eyes. "Then you'll do it?" Grace closed her eyes briefly. Not for you, for my grandson. I want to know him before I die, even if he never knows who I truly am." The next morning, James brought her to his apartment. The daylight revealed what darkness had hidden. The extravagance of his life built on his mother's sacrifice. Marble floors that gleamed like water. Furniture that cost more than Grace's entire farm. Windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering views of Lagos that people like her were never meant to see. Sophia was waiting, her silk kaftan emphasizing her slim figure despite her pregnancy. Her eyes widened at Grace's appearance, the simple wrapper, the calloused hands, the head tie that marked her as unmistakably rural. "This is Mama Grace," James said, his voice carefully casual. "From my village. She helped raise me after my parents died." Each word was a knife in Grace's heart, but she forced a smile. "Thank you for welcoming me into your beautiful home." Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "James says you need somewhere to stay while in Lagos. We have a small servants' quarters behind the kitchen. It's simple but clean." Simple meant tiny and sparse, Grace would later discover. A room smaller than her bathroom, with a narrow cot and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. Servants' quarters, because that's what she was now. Not mother, not grandmother, but servant. "Thank you," Grace said, maintaining her dignity. "I brought gifts." She held out her basket, hands trembling slightly. "Fresh yams from my farm. Palm oil I pressed myself. Herbs for soup, the kind James loved as a boy." Sophia looked at the basket as if it contained snakes. "How rustic! You shouldn't have troubled yourself. We shop at ShopRite." She turned to James. "Put these in the kitchen. Perhaps the cook can find some use for them." James took the basket, avoiding Grace's eyes, and disappeared down the hallway. A small voice called from another room, and Sophia sighed. "Daniel is awake. I suppose you should meet him." The little boy who trotted into the room stole Grace's breath. James's eyes, James's smile. But something else too, a curiosity, an openness that adult life had stripped from her son. "Who is this?" Daniel asked, studying Grace with interest rather than judgment. "This is," Sophia hesitated, "Mama Grace, from Daddy's village." Daniel tilted his head. "Are you a grandmother?" The question hung in the air like a fragile thing. Grace felt Sophia stiffen beside her, felt the weight of James's lie pressing down on all of them. "I am a mother," Grace said carefully. "And I know many stories from the village. Would you like to hear one sometime?" Daniel nodded eagerly, but Sophia cut in. "Perhaps later. Daniel has his lessons now." As the boy was led away, Grace caught his backward glance, curious, maybe even hopeful. In that moment, despite everything, she knew she would stay, for him, for the chance to know this piece of herself that lived on in a child who didn't know they shared the same blood. That afternoon, as Grace unpacked her few belongings in the servants' quarters, she heard raised voices from the main apartment. Sophia was angry about something. Grace stepped closer to her door, listening despite herself. "My diamond necklace is missing," Sophia's voice carried clearly. "The one my father gave me for our wedding." "Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" James asked, his voice tense. "It was in my jewelry box yesterday. Now it's gone. And the only new person in this house is that village woman you brought here." Grace's blood ran cold. Not even a full day, and already she was suspected of theft. "Sophia, you can't just accuse. Who else would it be? Our regular staff have been with us for years. She probably saw it and couldn't resist. Village people are always looking for ways to make quick money." Grace sank onto her cot, trembling. The accusation would come soon, she knew. The searching of her meager belongings, the humiliation, the suspicion. And what would her son do? Would he defend her honor, her integrity, or would he stand silent, allowing her to be branded a thief rather than risk his wife's displeasure? She took out the small worn photo she kept always. James at his university graduation, tall and proud in his gown, his arm around her shoulders. They were both smiling then, before success had poisoned him, before shame had replaced love. "What happened to my son?" she whispered, tears flowing freely at last. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. She quickly wiped her tears, squaring her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would face it with dignity. The door swung open without waiting for her response. Grace clutched the photograph to her chest as Sophia burst in, her face twisted with anger. James followed behind, his expression a mix of embarrassment and fear. "Where is it?" Sophia demanded, her eyes scanning the tiny room. "My diamond necklace. What have you done with it?" Grace rose slowly from the cot, her knees aching but her back straight. "I have taken nothing from your home." "Search her things," Sophia commanded, turning to James. "All of them, now." James hesitated, looking at his mother's worn suitcase, the few possessions she had brought from a lifetime of poverty. "Sophia, maybe we should what? Let her steal from us because you feel guilty about your village connections." Sophia's voice rose sharply. "Search her things, or I will call my father." The threat hung in the air. Grace watched her son's face, waiting for him to defend her, to remember the integrity she had taught him. Instead, he moved toward her suitcase, avoiding her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mama Grace," he said, the false name burning like acid between them. "It's just to clear things up." Grace stood motionless as they rifled through her few possessions. The extra wrapper, the faded dresses, the small Bible that had belonged to her husband. Each item turned over and discarded, her dignity shredded with every careless movement. "Nothing here," James finally said, relief evident in his voice. Sophia was undeterred. She could have hidden it anywhere, or sold it already. "I am not a thief," Grace said quietly, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "I have never taken what wasn't mine." "Then how did you survive all these years in that village?" Sophia sneered. "Everyone knows village people will do anything for money." James flinched, but said nothing. His silence was a betrayal deeper than any words could be. "I survived by the work of my hands," Grace replied, holding them up. Calloused, veined, honest hands that had never stolen, but had given and given until there was almost nothing left. "And by the grace of God," Sophia huffed in disbelief. "Well, until my necklace is found, you will not be left alone in this house. And to earn your keep, you'll handle the marketing. Our regular house help is on leave." With that, she thrust a list and a basket at Grace. "Go to Oingbo Market, get these items, be back before noon." They left as abruptly as they had entered, Sophia still muttering accusations, James a silent shadow behind her. As the door closed, Grace finally allowed her legs to give way, sinking onto the cot. She looked down at the shopping list, vegetables, fruits, spices, things she knew well, but had never bought in a city market with city money. "God," she whispered, "give me strength." The market engulfed Grace in a familiar chaos. The shouting of traders, the riot of colors from peppers and tomatoes stacked in pyramids, the pungent smell of fermented locust beans and dried fish. Here at least she knew her way. Her wrapper and head tie marked her as one of many market women, not an intruder or a servant. She moved from stall to stall, carefully counting the money Sophia had given her, bargaining out of habit, though the prices meant nothing to her son's wealthy household. As she selected tomatoes, testing their firmness between experienced fingers, a voice cut through the market noise. "Mama Grace, is that truly you?" She turned, confused at first. She had been Mama Grace for such a short time. But the man approaching her, dressed in an expensive agbada, was calling to her with genuine warmth, his face alight with recognition. "Do you not remember me?" he asked, his smile fading slightly at her confusion. "Michael, little Michael Aid, from the drought years." Grace's basket nearly slipped from her grasp. "Michael? The boy who stayed with me when the famine came?" "The very same," he said, taking her hands in his. "Though now they call me Chief Michael." He performed a small, respectful bow that made several nearby market women pause and stare. "What are you doing in Lagos, Mama, and shopping like a house help?" The concern in his voice broke something in Grace's careful composure. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "It is a long story," she managed to say. "Then you must tell it to me," he said firmly, "but not here." He took the shopping basket from her hands, ignoring her protests, and guided her to an idling SUV with a driver standing beside it. "Finish this shopping for us," he instructed the driver, handing over Sophia's list and money. "And deliver it to this address. Say it comes with the compliments of Chief Michael Aid." He opened the passenger door of his own car, a sleek black vehicle that gleamed in the sun. "Please, Mama, let me take you somewhere we can talk properly." Grace hesitated. "I should return to my son's house. They are expecting me." "Your son?" Michael looked surprised. "James is in Lagos? Wonderful. I have business connections he might find valuable. But first, please, just a short drive to my office, for old time's sake." Unable to refuse such kindness, Grace allowed herself to be guided into the car's cool interior. As they drove, Michael asked about the village, about her farm, about the years since he had left as a gangly teenager to seek his fortune in the city. "I never forgot what you did for me, Mama," he said as they pulled up to a towering office building with his family name emblazoned across the top. "When my parents died and the extended family rejected me, you took me in, shared your food when you barely had enough for yourself and James. You treated me like a son." "Any mother would have done the same," Grace said, though she knew it wasn't true. Many had turned the orphaned boy away. Inside his office, a vast space with windows overlooking Lagos, Michael insisted she take the seat of honor, ordering refreshments that arrived immediately. As she sipped chilled water from a crystal glass, Grace found herself telling him everything. James's education paid for with her blood, his gradual silence after success, the shocking discovery that he had told his wife she was dead, and now her degradation to Mama Grace, the village connection too embarrassing to acknowledge. Michael's face darkened with each revelation. "This is not how a son treats his mother in our culture," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "It is an abomination." "He has his reasons," Grace said, the habit of defending her son too ingrained to break. "His wife's family, they have expectations. And what of our expectations as Africans, as humans?" Michael shook his head. "Mama, let me honor you properly. Let me hold a celebration for you, to thank you for what you did for me all those years ago." No, Grace protested, alarmed. "I didn't tell you this to cause trouble. I just want to know my grandson before I return to the village." Michael leaned forward. "And you shall. But first, let Lagos see what James refuses to acknowledge, that you are a woman worthy of respect. Please, Mama, let me do this small thing for you." His eyes held such sincerity, such genuine respect, that Grace found herself nodding hesitantly. "A small gathering, perhaps." "I should call James first," Grace said suddenly, remembering the basket of shopping. "He will be worried." Michael nodded and handed her his phone. Grace dialed James's number with trembling fingers. "Hello?" James's voice was tense. "James, it is me." "Mama Grace." Relief and irritation mingled in his voice. "Where are you? The market items were delivered hours ago with some message from Chief Michael Aid. What's going on?" "I met an old friend from the village," Grace explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Michael Aid, the orphaned boy I took in during the drought, do you remember? He is a chief now with a big company." A long silence followed. When James spoke again, his voice had changed completely. "Chief Michael Aid, of Aid Holdings." The awe in his voice was unmistakable. "He remembers you?" "Yes, he has invited me to stay with his family for a few days, to catch up on old times." Another silence, this one calculating. That's wonderful, Mama Grace. Chief Aid is one of the most influential businessmen in Lagos. His connections are extraordinary." Grace could hear what remained unspoken, the sudden reassessment of her value now that she was connected to someone powerful. "Take as long as you need," James continued, his tone now warm and encouraging. "And please, tell Chief Aid I would be honored to meet him." After the call ended, Grace sat silent, a new pain twisting in her chest. James's voice had shown more enthusiasm about her connection to wealth and power than he had ever shown about seeing his own mother. Michael, who had been kind enough to step away during the call, returned to find Grace wiping away tears. "He didn't even ask if I was safe," she whispered. Only about your business connections. Michael's expression hardened. Then he will learn what it means to value status over family. Over the next 3 days, Grace rested in a guest suite in Michael's family compound, a space larger than her entire farmhouse. Michael's wife, Adana, welcomed her warmly, treating her not as a village woman but as an honored elder. Their 3 children called her Grandma Grace, bowing respectfully when they greeted her each morning. "My husband says you are the reason he survived to adulthood," Adana told her. "That means you are the reason we have our family. You are precious to us." On the 3rd day, as Grace sat on the veranda enjoying the morning breeze, Michael approached with an envelope in his hand. "It is time to honor you properly, Mama," he said, presenting it to her. "A celebration. Tomorrow evening." Grace opened the envelope to find an elegant invitation card, embossed with gold lettering. "In honor of Mama Grace Obi, a celebration of extraordinary sacrifice." "Michael, this is too much," she protested. "I did nothing special." "You gave your blood so your son could be educated," Michael said firmly. "You shared your food when you had little. These are not small things, Mama. These are the actions that define humanity at its best." Later that afternoon, Michael's assistant departed with several invitations, one specifically addressed to Mr. and Mrs. James Obi. The invitation mentioned only that Chief Michael Aid requested their presence at a special celebration, with no indication that Grace was the guest of honor. Meanwhile, Adana took Grace to a beauty salon, then to an exclusive boutique where she insisted on selecting a complete outfit for the celebration. "My husband wishes to honor you properly," Adana explained as Grace protested the expense. "Please allow us this joy." By evening, Grace barely recognized herself, transformed from a village woman into an elegant matriarch in a rich, indigo blue lace dress, with coral beads around her neck, signifying respect and status. For the first time in decades, she looked in a mirror and saw not just a weathered farmer, but a woman of substance. The celebration was held at a prestigious hotel. As Grace entered on Michael's arm, she gasped at the transformation of the space. Tables covered in white linen, flowers everywhere, a band playing soft high-life music, and dozens of guests in their finest traditional attire. "Too much," she whispered to Michael. "This is too much." "Nothing is too much for the woman who saved my life," he replied. As she was guided to a table at the front of the room, a seat clearly meant for a guest of honor, the doors at the back of the hall opened. Grace turned to see James and Sophia enter, clearly surprised by the grandeur of the event they'd been invited to. James was scanning the room eagerly, no doubt looking for the influential Chief Michael Aid, who had unexpectedly sent them an invitation the previous day. Their expressions froze as they spotted Grace seated in the place of honor. James's face drained of color. Sophia's mouth opened in shock and outrage. Before either could react, Michael stepped to the microphone set up near the head table. "Distinguished guests, we are gathered here today to honor a woman whose selfless heart and generous spirit changed the course of my life. When I was an orphaned boy, rejected by my own blood relatives, this woman took me in. She shared her meager food, treated my illnesses, taught me dignity and integrity." He turned to Grace, his eyes filled with emotion. "Today, we honor the woman who saved my life." James lunged forward through the crowd, panic etched on his face, desperate to stop what was coming next.
We hope you enjoyed this African tale. If you'd like to see the next part of this story, please subscribe to our channel and comment continue below. Your love keeps us motivated to bring you more great African stories. We really appreciate your love and thanks for being part of our community. It means a lot to us.